So as you can see after the game, Caitlin Clark and Sophie are both running up to the referee here. They are both so upset, and the referee is just walking away from them. He won't even look at them in the face. He keeps turning, like Sophie even went up at one point and is like tapping on his arm. He would not even look at them.
The WNBA just experienced its most explosive controversy in league history. What started as questionable referee calls during a single game has now erupted into accusations of corruption, bias, and a power struggle that reaches the very top of the organization. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert finds herself at the center of a storm that threatens to destroy everything the league has built during its historic breakthrough year. The numbers don't lie. The Indiana Fever got absolutely robbed, and fans watched it happen in real time. When your star rookie gets mauled on the court with zero protection from officials, when free throw disparities reach embarrassing levels, and when the league's own leadership appears complicit in the chaos, you know something seriously broken. What we witnessed wasn't just bad officiating, it was a systematic pattern that's been building for months, and now the entire foundation of women's professional basketball is cracking under the pressure.
They've done a great job of rigging this. They've done a great job of rigging this league. The league, they're not even being subtle. They're not even being subtle. Oh my God, this is embarrassing. This is embarrassing.
Picture this scene. Indianapolis is electric. The Fever are hosting the defending champion New York Liberty in what feels like a playoff atmosphere. Caitlin Clark, the rookie sensation who's brought millions of new eyes to the league, is ready to prove herself against the best team in basketball. The energy is unmatched, the stakes are sky high, and everything is set for an instant classic that would showcase the WNBA at its absolute peak. Instead, fans got a masterclass in how to destroy your own product. The Liberty attempted 32 free throws. The Fever, just 15. That's not a basketball game. That's a systematic dismantling of competitive integrity. Clark got shoved, grabbed, and physically dominated with absolutely zero protection from the officials. Meanwhile, Liberty players were getting whistle-happy treatment for the slightest contact. Two completely different rule books were being applied on the same court. The most damning moment came in crunch time. Clark drove to the basket and got hit by not one, not two, but four separate fouls on a single possession. The referees called exactly none of them. Imagine if LeBron James or Stephen Curry got that treatment in a playoff game. The league office would be issuing apologies within hours. But when it happens to the WNBA's biggest star, the officials just walk away, refusing to even make eye contact with frustrated players begging for explanations.
The fact that this referee wouldn't even acknowledge the players was kind of crazy to me. Like when I saw that, I said, this is really strange because the referee should have enough confidence in the calls that they made to at least discuss. You should be able to at least discuss.
I can't believe what I'm about to say. The Indiana Fever, with the strongest, loudest, most intimidating home court advantage in all the WNBA, just got robbed at home. I saw it with my own two eyes live on CBS.
This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of months of questionable treatment. From the moment Caitlin Clark stepped onto a WNBA court, the physicality against her intensified to levels that bordered on dangerous. Players were bumping her off screens, holding her during cuts, and delivering off-ball hits that looked more like football than basketball. The referees, silent witnesses to what appeared to be a coordinated effort to intimidate the league's newest superstar. Remember Kennedy Carter's blindside hit? That wasn't basketball. That was assault disguised as defense. Any reasonable observer would have called it a flagrant foul, possibly even an ejection. Instead, officials treated it like a routine play, sending a clear message that open season had been declared on Clark. The Indiana Fever currently sits at -31 in free throw differential this season. That's not a statistic, that's evidence of systematic bias. Week after week, the pattern continued. Clark would drive to the basket and absorb contact that would send other players to the free throw line. Her teammates faced phantom calls while opponents got away with increasingly aggressive play. The Fever's home court advantage, supposedly one of the loudest and most intimidating in the league, meant absolutely nothing when referees seemed determined to favor visiting teams. Fans weren't just frustrated, they were witnessing the slow-motion destruction of competitive fairness. Stephanie White had seen enough. After watching her team get jobbed for the 100th time, the Fever Fever head coach delivered a post-game press conference that will go down in WNBA history. Her message wasn't just criticism, it was a declaration of war against a system that had failed her players repeatedly. "The disrespect has been unbelievable," she declared, and every word carried the weight of months of accumulated frustration. White's fury wasn't just about one bad game, it represented the voice of everyone who had watched the league's officiating crisis unfold in real time. Her players were getting mauled while opponents lived at the free throw line. The disparity wasn't subtle, it was blatant, embarrassing, and completely indefensible. When a coach with White's reputation and professionalism reaches that level of public anger, you know the situation has spiraled completely out of control. The timing of White's explosion was perfect. With Caitlin Clark sitting silently beside her, the visual said everything. The league's biggest star and her coach, both exhausted by a system that seemed designed to undermine their success. White wasn't just defending her team, she was defending the integrity of women's basketball itself. Her words carried the frustration of every fan who had watched obvious fouls go uncalled and wondered if the games were even worth watching anymore.
Disappointing, that it doesn't go both ways, or it hasn't gone both ways. But we also can't allow that to consume us, right? Like, we've got to be able to play through that. We've got to be able to control the things that we can control. I felt like at times our late game execution was good, and I consider most of the latter half of the fourth quarter, because it was a tight ball game.
Just another year and another case of WNBA referees dropping the ball, not making the right calls when it comes to Caitlin Clark.
Behind the scenes, Commissioner Cathy Engelbert was facing a crisis that threatened to derail the WNBA's most successful season in decades. The league had finally broken through to mainstream attention, largely thanks to Caitlin Clark's star power and the incredible rookie class of 2024. Television ratings were soaring, attendance was booming, and corporate sponsors were paying attention like never before. Then the officiating scandals started piling up, threatening to destroy everything they had built. Engelbert found herself caught between multiple impossible pressures. Team owners were privately expressing concerns about the league's credibility. Players were openly questioning the fairness of competition. Fans were flooding social media with accusations of corruption and bias. The referees' union was defending their members while critics demanded accountability. Every decision she made seemed to create new problems while solving none of the existing ones. The situation became even more complicated when accusations of favoritism toward the New York Liberty began circulating. Critics pointed to questionable calls during the previous season's championship series, suspicious officiating patterns, and even Engelbert's choice of attire during trophy presentations. Whether these concerns were legitimate or conspiracy theories didn't matter. Perception had become reality, and the commissioner's credibility was evaporating in real time. The elephant in the room was getting harder to ignore. Fans and analysts began documenting patterns that suggested the New York Liberty received preferential treatment from referees. The evidence wasn't just statistical, it was visual, obvious, and increasingly difficult to dismiss as coincidence. When the defending champions consistently benefited from favorable calls while their opponents faced stricter officiating standards, questions about competitive integrity became unavoidable. The most damaging moment came during the previous year's WNBA finals, after a tightly contested series filled with controversial late-game calls that favored New York. Commissioner Engelbert stepped onto the court wearing what appeared to be Liberty team colors. The image of her smiling while presenting the championship trophy, dressed in blue and black, went viral for all the wrong reasons. Critics called it tone-deaf at best and evidence of systemic bias at worst. That trophy ceremony photograph became a symbol of everything wrong with the league's leadership. Every subsequent questionable call that benefited the Liberty was viewed through the lens of that moment. When the same patterns emerged during the Fever Liberty game, with New York receiving twice as many free throw attempts despite similar levels of aggression, the conspiracy theories gained credibility. Fans weren't just imagining bias, they were documenting it in real time. None of this controversy would have reached such heights without Caitlin Clark's unprecedented impact on the league. Her arrival transformed the WNBA from a niche sport into appointment television. Arenas that had struggled to fill half their seats were suddenly selling out. Television executives who had ignored women's basketball for decades were suddenly negotiating multi-billion-dollar media rights deals. Clark hadn't just joined the league, she had revolutionized it completely. But with that revolution came increased scrutiny. Every missed call became a trending topic, chaotic. Every questionable decision was analyzed by millions of new fans who weren't willing to accept substandard officiating. The stakes had never been higher, and the margin for error had never been smaller. When Clark got fouled with no whistle, it wasn't just affecting one game, it was potentially alienating millions of viewers who might never return. The league's response to the Clark phenomenon revealed its fundamental weakness. Instead of protecting their biggest star and ensuring fair treatment, officials seemed to allow increased physicality against her. Whether this was intentional bias or incompetent officiating didn't matter to fans who were watching their investment in the sport get undermined by poor decision making. The WNBA had a golden opportunity to convert casual viewers into lifelong fans, and they were squandering it with every missed call. What happened next exposed the true depth of the league's problems. Instead of conducting a thorough investigation into officiating patterns or implementing meaningful reforms, the WNBA appeared to be more focused on damage control than actual solutions. Referees who had blown obvious calls faced no meaningful consequences. The systematic issues that had created the crisis remained unaddressed. The league's response felt more like public relations management than genuine reform. Commissioner Engelbert's handling of the situation became increasingly problematic. Her public statements seemed disconnected from the reality that fans were witnessing on television. While she spoke about maintaining competitive integrity, viewers were watching that integrity erode in real time. The gap between official messaging and observable reality became so wide that even casual fans began questioning the league's credibility. The most frustrating aspect was the timing. The WNBA was experiencing unprecedented growth, with new expansion teams, record television deals, and mainstream media attention. All of that progress was being threatened by officiating controversies that could have been addressed with decisive leadership. Instead of seizing the moment to establish new standards of excellence, the league appeared to be retreating into defensive mode. Behind closed doors, the situation was even more chaotic than the public realized. League executives were fielding angry calls from television partners who had invested massive amounts of money in broadcasting rights. Sponsors were questioning whether their brand association with the league was worth the negative publicity. Team owners were split between those demanding immediate action and others worried about destabilizing the entire organization during its most crucial growth period. The referees union added another layer of complexity to the crisis. Their representatives insisted that criticism of officiating was unfair and potentially dangerous, pointing to increased social media harassment of their members. They demanded that the league defend its officials rather than throwing them under the bus to appease critics. This created an impossible situation where any meaningful accountability measures would trigger a labor dispute during the league's most important season. The controversy reached a tipping point when mainstream sports media began covering the story with the intensity typically reserved for major scandals in men's professional sports. ESPN dedicated entire segments to analyzing questionable calls. Social media influencers with millions of followers were breaking down referee decisions frame by frame. The story had transcended women's basketball and become a broader conversation about fairness in professional sports. What made the media coverage particularly damaging was its focus on specific examples that were impossible to defend. Slow motion replays showed clear fouls that went uncalled. Statistical analysis revealed patterns that couldn't be explained by random chance. Former NBA referees were going on television to criticize their WNBA counterparts, adding professional credibility to the accusations of incompetence or bias. The international dimension added another layer of embarrassment. The WNBA had been promoting itself as a global brand, with games broadcast in dozens of countries and international players becoming marquee attractions. Now those same international audiences were watching American officials make decisions that looked amateurish compared to basketball officiating in other leagues around the world. The league's reputation for professionalism was being undermined on a global stage. Perhaps most damaging was the emergence of compilation videos that went viral across social media platforms. These weren't produced by professional media outlets. They were created by passionate fans who had spent hours documenting questionable calls. The videos were devastating because they let the footage speak for itself. No commentary was needed when viewers could see dozens of examples of inconsistent officiating in rapid succession. profession. While coaches like Stephanie White were speaking out publicly, a more significant rebellion was brewing among the players themselves. Veteran stars who had normally stayed out of controversial topics were privately expressing frustration with the league's handling of the situation. The WNBA Players Association was fielding complaints from members who felt their careers were being undermined by incompetent officiating. Caitlin Clark's teammates became increasingly vocal about the treatment their star rookie was receiving. Aaliyah Boston, typically one of the most diplomatic players in the league, began making subtle comments about the need for fair and consistent officiating. Kelsey Mitchell started retweeting statistical analyses that highlighted the Fever's disadvantage in free throw attempts. Even players on other teams were speaking up, recognizing that the integrity of their entire profession was at stake. The players' frustration wasn't just about individual games. It was about the long-term implications for their careers and earning potential. The WNBA had finally reached a point where players could build sustainable careers and attract significant endorsement deals. All of that progress was threatened if fans lost faith in the legitimacy of competition. Players understood that their financial futures depended on maintaining viewer interest and sponsor confidence. More concerning was the impact on younger players who were watching this unfold. Rookies and second-year players were learning that success on the court didn't guarantee fair treatment from officials. The message being sent was that politics, popularity, and market considerations might matter more than actual performance. This threatened to undermine the competitive culture that had made the WNBA's product so compelling during its breakthrough season. The financial implications of the officiating crisis were staggering. The WNBA had just signed its most lucrative television deal in league history, with contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars over multiple years. Those agreements were based on projected viewership numbers that assumed continued growth in fan interest. If the officiating controversies drove away casual viewers, the league risked defaulting on the audience guarantees that justified such massive media investments. Corporate sponsors were equally concerned about their return on investment. Companies that had committed significant marketing budgets to WNBA partnerships were watching their brand messages get overshadowed by controversy. When fans were talking more about referee bias than athletic achievement, the positive brand association that sponsors were paying for simply wasn't materializing. Several major advertisers were reportedly reconsidering their commitment levels for future seasons. The situation was particularly problematic for companies that had specifically partnered with Caitlin Clark. Her endorsement deals were worth millions of dollars and represented a bet on her ability to maintain mainstream appeal. If questionable officiating undermined her on-court success or frustrated her fan base, those partnerships could become worthless overnight. The ripple effects would extend far beyond individual contracts to impact the earning potential of every player in the league. Team revenues were also at risk. The Indiana Fever had experienced unprecedented ticket sales and merchandise demand driven by Clark's popularity. But if fans began to believe that games were predetermined or unfairly officiated, that enthusiasm would evaporate quickly. Other teams that had benefited from increased interest in the league faced similar risks. The entire economic foundation of the WNBA's growth was built on fan trust, and that trust was eroding with every controversial call. While the WNBA was struggling with human officiating failures, other professional sports leagues had already begun implementing technological solutions to improve accuracy and consistency. The NBA had introduced replay review systems, challenge protocols, and even experimental automated strike zones in their development league. Major League Baseball was moving toward robot umpires for ball and strike calls. Meanwhile, the WNBA seemed stuck in the past, relying entirely on human judgment in an era when precision technology was readily available. The resistance to technological assistance revealed deeper problems within the league's power structure. Referee unions opposed changes that might reduce their authority or expose their mistakes. League executives worried about the cost of implementing new systems during a period of rapid expansion. Traditional broadcasters feared that constant replay reviews would disrupt the flow of games and reduce viewer engagement. Everyone had reasons to maintain the status quo, even as that status quo was destroying the league's credibility. But the most compelling argument for technological assistance was the betting dimension. Legal sports gambling had exploded across the United States, with millions of fans placing wagers on WNBA games. When officiating decisions directly influenced influence gambling outcomes, the integrity concerns became legal and regulatory issues. State gaming commissions were already monitoring the situation closely, and any evidence of systematic bias could trigger investigations that would devastate the league's reputation permanently. The irony was that technological solutions could have solved most of the controversy immediately. Automated foul detection systems could have eliminated debates about missed calls. Consistent strike zones could have ended disputes about differential treatment. Real-time statistical analysis could have identified officiating patterns before they became scandals. The technology existed, but the will to implement it did not. The officiating crisis took on an even more damaging dimension when international basketball officials began commenting publicly on the WNBA's problems. FIBA executives who oversaw basketball officiating for the Olympics and World Championships expressed concern about the league's standards. European leagues that had been considering partnerships with the WNBA started reconsidering those relationships. The scandal had become a source of international embarrassment for American women's basketball. Foreign players in the WNBA were particularly frustrated by the situation. They had come to America expecting to compete in the world's premier women's basketball league, only to discover that games were being decided by questionable officiating rather than athletic skill. Several international stars were reportedly considering returning to European leagues where the officiating was more consistent and professional. The timing couldn't have been worse for the league's global ambitions. The WNBA had been planning international expansion, with games scheduled in London, Paris, and other major cities. Corporate sponsors were investing in global marketing campaigns designed to build the WNBA brand worldwide. All of that progress was threatened by a crisis that made the league look amateurish compared to other professional sports organizations. Most damaging was the contrast with men's basketball officiating. The NBA had its own controversial calls and referee scandals, but nothing that compared to the systematic patterns that fans were documenting in the WNBA. International observers were asking why the women's league couldn't maintain the same standards of professionalism as the men's league. The answer to that question reflected poorly on everyone involved in WNBA leadership. One of the most fascinating aspects of the officiating controversy was how it exposed generational differences in fan expectations and media consumption. Older fans who had followed the WNBA since its inception were more willing to accept officiating inconsistencies as part of the game's character. They had watched the league struggle for survival and were grateful for any level of professional competition. Their loyalty was deep and unlikely to be shaken by referee controversies. Younger fans, particularly those drawn to the league by Caitlin Clark's popularity, had completely different expectations. They had grown up watching sports in high definition with instant replay, social media analysis, and statistical breakdowns of every play. When they saw obvious missed calls or statistical disparities, they documented them and shared them with millions of followers. Their engagement was passionate but conditional. They would walk away if the product didn't meet their standards. This generational divide created impossible challenges for league leadership. Decisions that satisfied longtime fans often frustrated newcomers, while changes that appealed to younger viewers sometimes alienated traditional supporters. The officiating crisis became a proxy war between different visions of what the WNBA should become. Commissioner Engelbert found herself trying to balance competing demands from fan bases that wanted fundamentally different things from their basketball experience. The social media dimension made everything more complicated. Older fans typically consume basketball through traditional media channels that filtered and contextualized controversial moments. Younger fans experience games through unfiltered social media feeds, where every questionable call became a viral moment. The same officiating decision could be ignored by traditional media while exploding across TikTok and Twitter, creating parallel realities where different fan bases were having completely different conversations about the same games. The implications of this officiating crisis extend far beyond individual games or even single seasons. The WNBA stands at a crossroads between mainstream acceptance and continued marginalization. The league has worked for decades to build credibility and attract sustainable fan interest. All of that progress can be undone if viewers lose faith in the fairness of competition. The Caitlin Clark factor makes everything more urgent. Her fan base represents the future of women's professional basketball. These are viewers who didn't grow up following the WNBA WNBA, who don't have decades of emotional investment in the league's success. They're judging the product based on what they see right now, and what they're seeing is questionable officiating that undermines competitive integrity. If these fans walk away, the league might not get another chance to reach this level of mainstream attention. The solution isn't complicated, but it requires courage from leadership. Officials need to be held accountable for poor performance. Systematic biases need to be identified and eliminated. The rules need to be applied consistently regardless of which teams are playing or which players are involved. Most importantly, the league needs to prioritize competitive integrity over any other consideration, including protecting certain franchises or managing specific storylines. The path forward demands immediate and decisive action. Referee training programs need complete overhaul with regular performance evaluations and consequences for consistent failures. Technology integration should be accelerated to provide objective analysis of controversial calls. League leadership must prioritize transparency over damage control, acknowledging problems rather than deflecting criticism. Fan feedback systems need to be established so that viewer concerns can be addressed before they become scandals. Most critically, the WNBA must recognize that its current success is fragile and conditional. The league's breakthrough moment represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity that could disappear if mishandled. Every questionable call pushes potential fans back toward other entertainment options. Every defensive response from league officials reinforces perceptions of an organization that's more concerned with protecting itself than serving its audience. The WNBA's moment of truth has arrived. They can either rise to meet the challenge of their increased prominence, or they can watch decades of progress evaporate because they couldn't handle success. The choice seems obvious, but as we've learned from this entire controversy, obvious solutions don't always translate into decisive action. The future of women's professional basketball hangs in the balance, and time is running out to get this right. What happens next will determine whether this crisis becomes a turning point toward greater professionalism or the beginning of a collapse that undoes everything the league has worked to achieve.